Hi, I want to welcome you to our 10th lecture in International Economics and Finance about exchange rate regimes. What we're going to discuss today are, of course, different possible exchange rate regimes countries can adopt. But before we start, uh, we need to uh, we need to define why it is important and what are the benefits of having either flexible or fixed exchange rates. So we're going to start by developing Marshall-Lerner Condition, which will tell us when depreciation or devaluation of the currency is beneficial for the economy, and then we're going to move to outlining the main differences between flexible and fixed exchange rates. Then we're going to move to policy Trilemma, which provides a very good context into the analysis of which exchange rate regime is optimal. And finally, in the last part, we're gonna discuss exchange rate regimes. Okay, so let's start by reviewing the real exchange rate. Real exchange rate, defined as Q, is equal to nominal exchange rate, defined as price in euros of purchasing $1, times price level in United States, divided by price level in the euro area. Okay, as you remember, this expression is actually giving us relative competitiveness of two economies. What we do over here is merely comparing the price levels into areas. But of course, because price level in US is expressed in dollars, we needed to use nominal exchange rates to change price level in United States into euros. Now, if this expression is getting higher, of course, this means that that the competitiveness of the European economy, eurozone economy, is getting higher, because of course it means that goods in United States are becoming more expensive relative to goods in in euro area, and consequently it is better to purchase goods from euro area. And look, here right away we can calculate three partial derivatives. First, we can differentiate real exchange rate with respect to US price level, and we get that this partial derivative is positive, which means, of course, that if prices in US are getting higher, the competitiveness of eurozone economy is getting higher. And here, conversely, we see that if price level in euro area is getting higher, then partial derivative is negative. We can calculate this easily using the quotient rule, and it makes perfect sense that with higher prices in euro area, competitiveness of euro area is getting lower. Finally, we've got the partial derivative with respect to nominal exchange rate. So we see here that if price in euros of purchasing $1 is getting higher, which of course means depreciation of euro or appreciation of dollar, we have that people from euro area now need to pay more for goods in United States, and residents of United States now need to pay less for goods from euro area. So a depreciation of euro will lead to improvement in the competitiveness of eurozone economy. And look, out of this we get three main results. First, competitiveness of the euro area economy increases if price level in the USA increases. Competitiveness of euro area decreases if price level in the eurozone increases, and competitiveness of euro area increases if euro depreciates or US dollar appreciates. Okay, this is like a little revision of what we already said before. So now let's move to current account. Look, current account, of course, is not only made of trade balance, but this is what we're gonna assume here. Where net factor income is inconsequential to us. Let's assume that the current account of given economy is given simply as a difference between exports and imports. Okay, and let's look at this expression. So here we have this current account, which is equal to trade balance. X represent exports, and M represents imports. But look, before exports are the goods that our domestic economy is producing and selling outside, but imports are goods produced outside that are bought by domestic residents. So prices of these goods are of course expressed in foreign currency. This is why we need to multiply it by real exchange rate in this case in order for both exports and imports to be expressed in the same currency. Now, look, as you see, in this setting, we can express current account simply as a function of real exchange rate. And look, if I'm gonna now take and differentiate current account with respect to real exchange rate, I'm gonna get derivative, of course, of exports with respect to exchange rate, real exchange rate, and here, look, I need to use the product rule, and because of that, this expression it turns into two separate expressions. On one hand, we have derivative of imports times real exchange rates, and over here we have simply imports. And look, this is an extremely important fact that will allow us to shed a little bit more light on what happens when real exchange rate changes. Okay, look, in the next step, what am I going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by imports, right? As a result, each of these expressions is divided by import, while imports are turning into 1. Now, I'm going to use one additional assumption. I'm going to assume that current account is is at 0. So imports are equal to exports, which we see over here. And now, look, out of this, I can calculate that imports are equal to exports divided by real exchange rate. So, out of this, if I'm going to use this expression and substitute it over here, I'm going to get what you see in Formula 9. Now, why is this Formula 9 so important? Because look, real exchange rate elasticity of exports is given by definition as the derivative of exchange rate with respect to exports with respect to exchange rate divided by exports divided by real exchange rate. And similarly, real exchange rate elasticity of imports is given by negative. Of course, we should remember that the signs of the two are going to be different, because of course if exchange rate if competitiveness of our economy increases, exports should go up while imports should go down. And look, using those two, I can express a quotient of the derivative of current account to imports as the sum of two elasticities minus 1. And look, this is telling us that the sign of this derivative is going to be positive if and only if sum of those two elasticities is bigger than 1. Okay, and look, this condition, as it turns out, is really easy to be fulfilled in practice. So, what does this lead to? Look, we can now see that having those two relationships established, we will have two different effects. Two different effects of changes in real exchange rates on imports. Because look, on one hand, we will have so-called value effect. Look, if exchange rate is depreciating, what does it mean? It means that now our goods are getting more competitive, but also imported goods are becoming more pricey. They become more expensive. So, look, if we have contracts expressed in foreign currency, and now exchange rate is changing, it means that now for the goods that we already ordered, we need to pay more, pay more money. So the initial effect of depreciation should definitely be negative. It should be detrimental to our current account, which means that value of imports is rising. This is why we call it value effect. And this is associated in the derivative with this expression negative m. On the other hand, volume effect is associated with those two expressions. Because look, if we observe depreciation of our currency, so real exchange rate is going to go up. Of course, the same thing can happen as a result of changes in price level. What we will see is now our exports are becoming more competitive and foreign imports are becoming less competitive. Now, the thing is that we've defined those two effects, but the thing is we do not know exactly how they're gonna evolve over time from what we said. To do it, we actually need something, a tool that is dynamic. So it's gonna show us what is going to happen over time. And for that, we use so-called J-curve. Look, here we see current account balance. And here you see impact of depreciation. And look, if at the beginning, the impact is negative. Why? This for the reason that we said. Look, if either our nominal exchange rate depreciates, or if prices of, for example, foreign goods are going up, but of foreign goods are going up, then we can expect that we need to pay more for what we already ordered, and on impact we see that it will have negative effect on trade balance, on current account. But with time, in the long run, this effect is turning. What does it mean? Look, as our goods have become more competitive, we will see more orders from foreign countries, while our residents will be substituting imports with home production. And at some time T2, we see that the two effects are actually canceling each other out, while in the long run, we would expect that that this effect is going to positive on our current account. When this effect is positive, well, as we said already, it is positive when sum of the elasticities is bigger than 1. And this is what we call Marshall-Lerner Condition. As long as Marshall-Lerner Condition is fulfilled, which, as I said, in reality is really easy to be fulfilled, we can we can safely assume that depreciation of our currency is going to improve our trade balance. Okay, so from this moment on, we will be assuming that some of those two elasticities is bigger than one, which we observe in practice. Okay, so now let's move to the relationship between current account and equilibrium exchange rate. Look, let's assume for the time being that there are no capital flows. Or even with limited capital flows, our reasoning would still hold, but let's assume that there are no capital flows. Look, in this case, the value of the exchange rate will depend only on how much foreigners, how much goods, our domestic goods, foreigners would like to buy, and how much foreign goods we would like to buy. So, look, if exports are higher than imports, it means that foreigners would like to buy more of our goods, which means that they need to purchase more of our currency, and the price of our currency should appreciate. On the other hand, if imports are higher than export, it means that we want to purchase more than foreigners would like to buy from us, and as a result, our currency would be depreciating because we would like to buy more and more of foreign currency. And look, this adjustment process would be taking place until, of course, the two are equalized, and as a result, current account is at zero. And let's denote that Q0, let's say that Q0 denotes our equilibrium exchange rate, for which current account is balanced. So it closes at zero. Now, I know that you might ask, but so what is the point of, for example, depreciation if the current account is going to be always closing at zero? But look, here you see that actually we can still produce more and buy less and have current account at zero because exchange rate is also the part of the equation. This is the part that actually can assure us that even though we are selling, for example, more, we are buying less, but we pay for it more for what we buy, and at the end, current account closes at zero. Okay, and now look, we can plot this on a graph. Here you can see our imports, and look, we know that as our economy is becoming less and less competitive, so when Q goes down, real exchange rate goes down, we see that we will be buying more and more of foreign goods. Of course, the higher is the competitiveness of our economy, so the higher the real exchange rate. We are looking from the perspective of European Union, Euro area. The less goods from abroad we are going to be purchasing. And in the case of exports, is the opposite. The more competitive we are, the more we sell abroad. Of course, only at the point where the two are equal to one another, we will have equilibrium exchange rate, and the production of European goods that we will get production of the European goods, level of production of the European goods associated with this equilibrium exchange rate. Okay, now let's look at this a little bit more closely from the strictly short run perspective. So we've got we need to make two very simple assumptions. First, because we are considering the short run, we are only discussing changes in nominal exchange rates. We are disregarding changes in prices. We are assuming simply that prices are constant. And the second one is to make all the calculations, let's just say simpler. Let's assume that the ratio of the prices in the two countries, in the two areas, is equal to 1. If it would be equal to 2, it would be inconsequential, but the formulas would not look as nice as they can now. Look, in this situation, equilibrium condition is now becoming a function of nominal exchange rate alone. And now S0 is going to be the equilibrium nominal exchange rate. And now look, we can again show this situation on the graph. Look, now we've got imports as a function of nominal exchange rate and exports as a function of nominal exchange rate. At the intercept of the two curves, we see equilibrium exchange rate at level S0, and of course associated with this level of production of European goods. Okay, now let's imagine a situation like this. European Union decides to drastically decrease all customs on American goods. This will shift our imports function from position 0 to position 1. And look, now assuming we have flexible exchange rates, so central bank does not intervene at all, what will happen is that we will have a new equilibrium point at B, and associated with this new equilibrium nominal exchange rate. Of course, this one is going to be higher, which is associated with either US dollar appreciation or euro depreciation. Now, this situation, of course, it happens when we have flexible exchange rate. But imagine that for some reason, European Central Bank decided to maintain a fixed exchange rate. In which sense? Look, let's just say that this S0 was the parity that that European Central Bank has chosen. And European Central Bank also chosen a band. So all within this band are all acceptable exchange rates that are of course center around S0. But as you see over here, the new nominal exchange rate is above this band. So what can European Central Bank do? Well, we see here that that this shift in imports was associated with depreciation of the European currency. So now what can be done is that European Central Bank can take its reserves of US dollars and sell them on the market for euros. By doing so, there will be more dollars on the market and less euros, which can, if the intervention size in real terms is equal to this distance, will bring the exchange rate to to the within the bands acceptable by European Central Bank. Okay, and look, this in a nutshell illustrates entire idea of how to use how to use operations of selling and purchasing of foreign currency or selling or buying reserves in order to maintain the exchange rate within the acceptable level. So look, this is the main difference between flexible and fixed exchange rates. If we want to let the currency take any value we want, central bank doesn't need to do anything. But if the central bank wants the currency to stay within these bands, what central bank should do is to either uh, uh, sell reserves or so take dollars, sell them on the market for euro, put the euros safely in a safe, and by doing so, retrieving them from the market, making less euros on the market, and leading to appreciation of euro. Or if the central bank wants to do the opposite, it can sell euros for US dollars, keep US dollars in the safe, and as a result, euro would appreciate. Okay, and this is actually all that we need to know to properly understand how exchange rate intervention needs to be performed in order to keep fixed exchange rate. Look, of course, if we want to keep it at exactly level as zero, we would just have to sell more dollars to keep the exchange rate at the initial level. Okay, so now that we understand how this intervention can be performed, let's move to policy trilemma. Look, generally, countries can pursue three different macroeconomic policy objectives. First one is monetary policy independence. Monetary policy independence guarantees us that we can use monetary policy in any way we want in order to influence prices in the economy or unemployment or GDP growth. So we can use monetary policy to affect the situation in our economy. Which, of course, if we have a situation when we, for example, have very high unemployment, is a very desirable thing to have at your disposal. The second macroeconomic policy objective is a fixed exchange rate. Look, why would we like to have a fixed exchange rate? When currencies are fixed, when exchange rates are fixed, trading with other countries is becoming more predictable, and because of this, we expect more trade. And look, think about it. When we were talking about forward exchange rates, if we have a fixed exchange rate, we don't need to have forward exchange rate because we know exactly what the value of the currency is going to be in the future, which can greatly decrease costs costs of international trade, and by doing so, the international trade is going to increase. The third macroeconomic policy objective we can pursue is international capital mobility. Why international capital mobility is something worth pursuing? Well, look, if we have more opportunities to invest, we can be sure that resources are allocated more effectively, and as a consequence, the surplus generated through this investment is going to be greater in comparison with in a situation where you can only invest in your own country. And look, it's beneficial from both the perspective of the countries that are receiving investment, as well as the countries uh, uh, that are investing because they can expect higher returns. Okay, and now let's put these three macroeconomic policy objectives in a context of uncovered interest rate parity. Look, from our previous discussion, we know that uncovered interest rate parity says that interest rate in euro area at time t is equal to interest rate in United States at time t plus expected appreciation of the currency. Now, what we're gonna add to this equation is transaction cost. Transaction cost on simply allocating funds in different countries. So we can imagine a situation in which those costs are prohibitive due to, for example, legal framework, and we cannot invest in other countries at all. But of course, we can have no cost or almost no cost, where investing in other countries is becoming extremely easy. And look, if we take this uncovered interest rate parity as our point of reference, we will see that there might be some discrepancy between those three possible macroeconomic policy objectives. Okay, so look, let's start with monetary policy independence. Monetary policy independence means that the euro area can set interest rate at any desirable level. But we see that this should be reflected in either change in United States interest rate or expected appreciation of the currency. Unless, of course, we impose some capital restrictions. If we have these capital restrictions, then we can maintain a different interest rate in the in the euro area than in United States, and at the same time we can maintain the same exchange rate, because we see that in this case there is no reason for those two to be different than one another. But look, if we don't impose these restrictions on capital mobility, then something needs to happen. If US and and euro area are pursuing different different monetary policies, then there are no transaction costs, there are no any impediments to capital flows, we should expect that this change will be reflected in the change in the exchange rate. Okay, so look, what we see at this moment is that if we want to pursue monetary policy independently, then we either need to impose capital restriction or allow the currencies to fluctuate, because we will not be able to maintain fixed exchange rate. And look, this actually works in every direction here. If we want to have international capital mobility, so no transaction costs and fixed exchange rate, this means that we need to anchor monetary policies in such a way that the interest rates do not differ. So we are foregoing monetary policy independence. Look, this is why the problem of pursuing these three macroeconomic policy objectives is called either as called policy trilemma, impossible trinity, or incompatible triangle. Basically, what it means is that we can only achieve two out of these three goals. If we have independent monetary policy and we want to keep fixed exchange rate, we need to introduce restrictions on capital mobility. If we want to have capital mobility and maintain monetary policy independence, we need to let go of fixed exchange rates. And finally, if we want to have fixed exchange rates and capital mobility, we cannot have monetary policy independence. Okay, and look, this trilemma is actually very good at explaining the different choices of exchange rate regimes. And look, over the last 150 years, we can actually distinguish four different periods in which we have different monetary monetary regimes. Okay, first from 1870 to start of the First World War, we had gold standard. So all the currencies were exchanged at a fixed ratio for gold. So they had their parity in gold. And look, knowing how much you need to pay in pounds for gold and knowing how much you need to pay in dollars for gold, then you could easily calculate how much you need to pay for how many pounds you need to pay for dollar or how many dollars you need to pay for a pound. Look, this period was characterized mainly by pursuing fixed exchange rates and capital mobility. So in this period, the countries did not have independent monetary policies because they needed to maintain convertibility of their currencies for gold at a fixed ratio. They could not pursue monetary. They could not pursue monetary policy independently. Then, after the outbreak of First World War, until the end of the Second World War, which of course is the period that also includes the Great Recession, things changed significantly. Look, in this period, we had a situation in which countries started breaking from the gold standard, and because they wanted to either finance their war efforts, so they needed to use monetary policy aimed at their individual country level goals, which made the possibility of course keeping fixed exchange rate impossible, and something that was associated especially with the Great Recession, countries were doing a beggar thy neighbor policy. What is this type of policy? Look, basically, it's the situation in which you perform devaluation. As you remember, devaluation is a counterpart of depreciation in fixed exchange rate regimes. It means that central bank is doing everything in its power to lower the value of its own currency. So, for example, if a Bank of England would like to devaluate pound, it would buy dollars, marks, francs from the market in exchange for pounds, putting more pounds on the market, less of those currencies. Those currencies would appreciate, and a value of the pound would depreciate. as a result. But of course, this is called this time devaluation because it's not done by market forces, but it's done by conscious decision of the central bank. And look, the thing is that by pursuing this type of policy, they could improve their current accounts, they could improve their trade balances. But the problem is that everybody can do the same thing. And if everybody is doing the same thing, so if everyone is devaluating their currencies, it's not helping anybody, but it's definitely destabilizing international monetary system. This is why in this period, what we could observe was a situation in which, of course, gold standard broken, so currencies started to fluctuate, to fluctuate. Capital mobility was also lower because a lot of countries, to be able to maintain their policy, also introduced capital controls. But definitely, most of the countries were pursuing the monetary policy independently. Now, to avoid such a devastating shock to monetary system, in Bretton Woods, in United States, there was right after the Second World War, new monetary system was designed. It was also associated with the creation of IMF, that is responsible for maintaining stability of the monetary system all over the world, and World Bank, that is supposed to fight the poverty in different countries. Look, what happened over there is that United States dollars had a parity in gold. It was $35 per 1 ounce of gold, and all other currencies were fixed to United States dollar. Look, in this period, again, we didn't have policy. We didn't have policy autonomy, but we had fixed exchange rates, right? Again, this was a device that could improve international trade and increase its growth over time. Also, initially, it was capital controls were included, but they were diminishing over time, which were one of course, the reasons why Bretton Woods broke up later. Look, but here the situation was very asymmetric. There is something called n-1 problem. Look, it's like with degrees of freedom in statistics. Look, if all the currencies are pegged to dollar, then United States can pursue their monetary policy goals independently, but other countries need to adjust their policies to accommodate what the United States are doing. And because of this situation, for example, United States could export its inflation to different countries while pursuing its own monetary policy goals within the country. And because of that, finally, in 1971, Bretton Woods started breaking up and finally broke completely in what I believe is 1974, and we moved to new era that we have even until now, which is an era of floating exchange rates. So now the policy trilemma moved in yet another direction. So now we are allowing currencies to float independently for most of the countries, uh, but at the same time we are gaining monetary policy independence, and we are allowing for free capital movement. But look, what I'm when I'm talking about now era of floating exchange rates, it doesn't really mean that we have perfectly flexible exchange rates. It doesn't even mean that all the countries have flexible exchange rates. We should remember that both fixed exchange rates and floating exchange rates are two corner solutions. They're purely theoretical. And reality exists somewhere in between those two corner solutions. Okay, so let me now show you what I mean by referring to again to IMF. Here you see something that I was already showing you before. This is the classification of exchange rate regimes by by IMF. And look, here rows represent different exchange rate regimes, and here we have different monetary policy frameworks. Because look, some countries are pursuing targeting monetary aggregates like M2 or M3. Some pursue inflation targeting. Of course, there are also other less popular choices, usually the hybrids of pursuing some inflation targeting with supporting low unemployment in the economy. And the second thing here is exchange rate anchor. So sometimes some countries are using different currencies, currencies to fix their own currency. Usually, it's done in terms of dollar. And look, you see here how many different categories we have, from independently floating countries where we have United States, Japan, Switzerland, Korea, or even Poland, to managed floats, when we usually central bank intervenes from time to time to maintain exchange rate within some bounds. Then we've got crawling pegs. When exchange and look, generally as we go higher and higher and higher, we've got more and more and more intervention, and we are getting closer and closer to fixed exchange rates. Well, the perfect example nowadays of fixed exchange rates is euro area. Look, here we have, well, this is very old. I'm actually going to show you some newer classifications in a second. But now we've got 19 different countries that have common currency. There is no better fixed exchange rate regime in today's world, as an example, because those countries, by introducing common currency, actually they fixed their currencies permanently, and now they cannot devaluate their currency within their countries. And look, of course, I do not want you to know all the possible cases over here, but I want you to know that those cases exist, and I'm going to provide you the links to all those classifications that you can, and they're gonna be in the link is gonna be in the description of the video. So look, we see that there is a lot of variety, but definitely this period is characterized by the most floating of exchange rates than we observed in the last 150 years. Okay, Here, I would like you to see there is a also rather old working paper that provides a very detailed classification of exchange rate regimes in accordance to policy of objectives and actual legal framework announced by the countries. Look, one important thing is also a distinction between de facto system and de jure systems. Look, de jure is what country claims for its exchange rate to be. De facto is what actually it does. Sometimes countries can say that they pursue floating exchange rate, but they intervene quite a lot, which would say that they are actually a little bit closer to fixed exchange rates. And finally, here you can find a paper by Professor Marek Dąbrowski, Professor Bonika Papież, and Sławomir Śmiech. They're actually from Poland, and they provide yet another very new classification of de facto classification of exchange rate regimes that was derived based on actual observation of what is happening in the economies. Okay, so this is it about exchange rate regimes. In the next video, we're gonna go back to how exchange rates are determined, and we're gonna start with the monetary approach to exchange rate determination. Thank you for your attention and take care. Bye.